Hi, everyone. Hey, it's Bill Free here and Peter Russell. Welcome to the New Beginning World Conference and our first keynote speaker of the day. This is the morning session, and I want to tell everyone a little bit about Peter Russell. He's our guest teacher this morning, and Peter is an author. He is a leading thinker on consciousness and contemporary spirituality. And I love this idea. I'd like to hear more about it. He coined this term global brain with his 1980s bestseller of the same name, in which he predicted the internet and the impact it would have on humanity. And Peter is, I found Peter at SAND. He's one of the speakers over there, a keynote speaker for science and non-duality. And that's where I first found out about Peter. I watched some of his presentations there, and then I looked him up, and I found him to be such an interesting speaker. And I'm not positive on this. I'd like to know more. I think you might be a physicist. Are you a physicist, Peter?
I was a physicist.
Okay.
I'm a recovering physicist.
Okay.
By which I mean I studied physics. I studied mathematics and theoretical physics at college, but I never took up a career in it. But I still maintain a very active interest in it.
Okay. Okay, great. Well, I mean, I was really hoping that Peter would be part of this conference. He is very involved at Science and Non-Duality, and I have been a member there for about 3 years. I love that organization. Several of our speakers have come to my attention from Science and Non-Duality, or they were recommended, or someone that I saw being interviewed by Rick Archer over at Buddha at the gas pump. And I just love what that organization stands for. What they do as an organization is amazing. They're a huge community of spiritual beings that are teachers, and they're a bright light in this world, around the world, and I couldn't recommend them higher. And just want to mention that, and then for this time together with Peter, for our 90 minutes together, Peter's gonna give us a talk, and he'll probably have some practices for us, or some experiential, maybe a meditation or something, and I'll leave that up to him. But we're also going to invite you to Q&A. We're going to invite you to ask Peter direct questions. We have a Q&A button at the bottom of the screen, and you can type your Q&A there. I would really like to bring you on live in video. It takes about 15 or 20 seconds to bring you on live, and that way we get to see your face, ask the question. Well, it looks like Lisa Natoli is pressing the wrong button for a minute. And but you can come on live just like that, only we'll bring you in to ask your question directly. And if you post your question in the chat, please put a Q in front of your question if it's a real question, because otherwise we'll let the chat be comments. If a lot of people like to comment on something that the speaker just said, that just brings a voice up in your mind that wants to comment about it, that's fine. But if it's a real question, please put a Q in front of it in the chat. My preference would be to put it in the Q&A if you're going to type a question, and then I would like to upgrade you to a panelist to bring your video on. And that's about it in the housekeeping side of things. Peter's topic today is coming home, And everyone, please give a warm welcome to Peter Russell. Thank you for being here, Peter.
Thanks, Bill. Really pleasure to be here with you. Had a great conference as well. Because I've actually had a long interest in A Course in Miracles. It goes back actually to the very beginning of A Course in Miracles. I think I have the dubious distinction of having the first copy to arrive in England. I was having tea with someone called Marcus McCausland, and a box of books arrived. He said, "Oh, this is this new book which Judith Scutch has been saying she's going to publish." He said, "Let's open the box." And we opened the box, and there was, the classic 3 volumes. And he took 3 out and he said, we flipped through it. He said, "Oh, this may be something you'll be interested in," and handed me the 3 copies. And I went home, and they sat on my desk for about a week. I hadn't opened them, and a friend came along. He said, "What's this?" I said, "I don't know. I've just given it. I haven't actually looked at it yet." And he said, "Oh, this looks really interesting." He said, "Can I borrow it?" And I said, "Sure." And that was the last I saw of the course and the last I saw of him. And then a few years later, a friend who was then really into the course and had it all, and it was all highlighted. And I started looking at it and thinking, wow, this is interesting. So it's been an important teaching for me throughout my life. I wouldn't say I'm a dedicated teacher of it like many of you are, but it's been important in my life. And so's non-duality. Those 2 threads, I think I sort of started getting interested in the whole notion of non-duality, probably even a bit sooner, when I started getting interested in meditation in the late 60s. So these 2 themes that Bill's put together here are just really, both of them, close to my own heart. And I decided to call this session Coming Home. Two reasons. One, we are coming home. I mean, we are many of us, we're being told to stay at home, and I don't know about everybody, but it's a time when we're actually coming back to our own physical home, and seeing that also as a chance to come home, come to our real home inside, in the sense in which the Course talks about it, that place we never actually left. So seeing here as a chance to be at home physically, and to use that time even more than ever to come back to our own inner being. Because I think that's really the essential thing that we're being asked to do at this time. And this is clearly a momentous time historically. I think we'll look back on this and see, the day the world changed in many ways, and it's a global thing. I mean, I'm sure many people have said this, it's affecting everybody, every country. Nobody's, I would say, immune from it, but you know what I mean? It's universal in that sense. And we don't know where it's going. I mean, we have various ideas, various hopes, maybe some concerns. No one actually knows how this is all going to pan out. And so that means we're living in very uncertain times, unpredictable times. And there's a lot of change coming. I sort of think, I sort of think it's like, we talk about the winds of change. I think things are sort of building up into a storm of change. And if you know what's coming, like, if you're facing a hurricane, you know when it's coming, you know what to do, you board up your windows or you get away, whatever it is. If it's something like that, we know what to do. But where we don't know what's going to happen, where we're dealing with the unpredictable, we don't quite know what to do. And I think the most important thing we do is coming back to ourselves. And I mentioned a storm. I like to liken things to a forest of trees. I used to live in a forest for a long time and saw many storms pass through. And the first thing a tree needs in a storm is to be grounded, is to be rooted in the ground. And I think that's something which we all really need for what's coming, is just to be grounded in ourselves, to be grounded in our own being, so that we're not thrown around and shaken emotionally by every new change that comes, so that we can actually be steady in ourselves. And the second thing trees need is to be flexible, is to be able to sway with the wind. And I think we need that as well, to better just move with the changes that come and not be rigid in our thinking. We're going to be facing completely new situations, and we need to let go of old ways of thinking, old ways of doing things, to be more creative, to look at things with fresh eyes. And that flexibility comes from being able to step out of our egos, our fixed assumptions of what is what, and to actually just look at things, for coming back to ourselves and look at things. What is really going on here? What's really needed of me? And the other thing that always fascinated me in Storm in a Forest, the storm could be raging and the trees, swaying backwards and forwards overhead. But down on the ground, in the middle of the forest, it would be still. It always fascinated me. It's like the trees protected the ground, and the ground was still, although the storm was raging overhead. And that's what we need, I think, is to come back to that inner stillness, to come back to that. And I think the more we can develop these things, being grounded in ourselves, flexible, and just coming back to our stillness, coming back to our own being, our own inner being. And what I mean by being is, I like to go back, it's the verb to be. And if we decline the verb to be, it says I am, you are, it is. And we often think of being in the third person as it is. What is being. But really what we're talking about here is the first person. The first person experience of being is that quality of I am. That's being for us, is that knowing that I am. Or sometimes, as I like to put it, we even need to drop the I sometimes and just call it about as being is amming. And that's what we are. We are amming, just being here. And that's something that's always with us, but often we don't notice. We overlook it because our attention is directed outwards onto the world or onto what we're thinking. We're looking in the opposite direction. We're looking out into the world, and we don't notice that inner quality of beingness that's always there, that I amness that's ever present. And this is something which is very strong part of the whole non-duality theme, coming back to noticing that quality of I-ness that's always there. And Ramana Maharshi came up with the question, well, he probably didn't come up with it originally, but he reintroduced the question to the world of who am I, which is a question which is often put to people. I know people have been on intensives where you look at that question for hours on end, who am I? And what people tend to do initially is come up with all the things they identify with, the things they think they are. I might say, well, I'm Peter, that's my name. I'm British, but that's just my nationality I was born in. I'm male, that's the body I happen to have. Or I'm a writer, that's part of my profession, or I'm, whatever it is politically. But that's not what the question's getting at. That's where people tend to go initially. The question, I think the word who is actually misleading because it leads us into looking for something other than ourself. And I think what the question was really meant by Ramana Maharshi is, what am I? What does I actually refer to when we use the word I? What do we mean by I? And I actually the way I like to phrase it sometimes is to drop the who or the what altogether and just phrase the question, am I? Or are you? And if we phrase it that way, then I think, everybody says, yes, of course, I am. And that's what the question's pointing to, is that quality of I amness that's always there. And that's really the heart of, it's the heart of non-duality. And it goes back to the Upanishads of ancient India, about 2,500 years ago. And I think the clearest, description from back then that I know of non-duality, it comes from the Chandogya Upanishad. And there's a story there of a father who sends his son off to school. He sends him away to school, and the son goes away for He's at school for 10 years. And he comes back home very proud of himself and everything he's learned, whatever they were learning at the time, the healing arts, the herbs, the astrology, the ceremony, the rituals, maybe elementary mathematics, whatever it is they were teaching those days. And he comes back full of himself and everything he's learned. And his father says to him, "Did they teach you about that by which all this is known?" And he says, "What?" He says, "Did they teach you about that by which all this is known?" And the son says, "No, no, please tell me, father." And that starts a whole teaching. And one of the teachings there, the father says, you see these different pots of clay. Here we have pots of clay, and each pot is different. They're all unique, different pots. And yet, they're all made of clay. They're all made of the same essence. And this is one of the things about non-duality which is important. It isn't saying everything is one alone. It's saying there is not just duality. The original Indian word is advaita, which means not two. There is not just the duality. There is duality, there is difference, we are all different. These pots are all different pots. That difference is very, very real. And they're all of the same essence. And he points out that essence is not only is it the same essence for every pot, it is unchanged by being a pot. The clay doesn't change when it becomes a pot. It's the same clay in every pot. And you could say the clay is untouched by being a pot. It's pure, the pure clay. And and then he goes in that teaching to say, that essence, which is the essence of all things, or in that case, all the pots, that essence of all things, that art thou. And that's where that phrase comes from that you may have heard in Sanskrit. It's tat tvam asi. It means that art thou. So and the teaching goes on with many, many different examples where he's pointing out the essence is always there, always the same. And that essence is what you are. And that's what he's pointing to. And that essence is that quality of I am, the beingness. And that it's always there. Most of the time we don't notice it. Our attention is out, as I say, on what we're doing, our thoughts, our conversations we're having with people, whatever it is. Our attention is out there. So we don't notice it. But it's always there in the background, and it's always the same. It doesn't change at all. The sense of I am that is here today is the same as it was yesterday, last year. It's that same feeling of being that was there when I was a kid. It's there all through my life, and it's always the same. And so it's coming back to noticing that essence. And then there's the other side. You could say that essence is the absolute side of life. The absolute is that which is never changing. And then there's the relative, the duality, which the Advaita points out is equally ego, and that is our own individual sense of self, what we sometimes call the ego, or I call it the ego mind. And that's different for each of us. We're all very different individuals with our own thoughts, our own history, our own feelings, our own opinions. That's the duality. And the point is, I think, of these teachings is that we live most of the time in the duality. We seldom come back to the essence. I'm just going to say a few words about ego, because I think it's something which sometimes gets misunderstood. I like what the Course says about ego, that it's a thought system. You see, there isn't actually anything we could call ego. If I look inside myself, if I look inside myself looking for, a sense of, an individual self, an individual ego, I don't find anything. I mean, I find I have various thoughts, there's various emotions, various feelings, but I don't find a thing that is thinking them or feeling them. There's no sense of an individual self there. It's just the thoughts that are appearing, the thoughts that are arising in the mind. And some of those thoughts may be self-centered thoughts to do with my own well-being, how I'm doing, what I want, what I need. And they may at times be, conditioned by past experiences where I get a little over self-centered in my thinking. But that's, I think, what we often call ego, is when we're, tending to ourself at the expense of others, not really being too concerned with other people. That's how we often use ego. Like, that person is very, very egocentric, meaning they're looking after themselves at the expense or not caring for others. But as I say, there's not really, I don't find a thing called the ego. And that's why I like the course's description of the thought system. I like to call it the ego mind. It's a way of thinking that we get caught up in, and perhaps caught up in a lot of the time. And ultimately, it's a way of thinking that is there for our survival. It's there to help us get through in the world. And what this way of thinking does, it tends to divide up our experience into two parts. And in some ways, our experience is just one whole. But when we start, getting concerned about this body, this organism, how are we doing in the world, we tend to divide the experience up into two parts. There's I, here, this body, and there's the other, it, the rest of the world. And so we divide our experience into me here, the world out there. And in some sense, it's an artificial distinction, but it's a very useful distinction if we're trying to look after this body. And it's what Alan Watts called a skin encapsulated ego. We think of ourselves as inside the skin and the not me as outside the skin. And then, because there's not actually anything there's not actually an individual separate self there, it's just a way of thinking. But what we tend to do is we tend to want to make it into a thing. We want to think, I am a thing. But there is no thing there, but we think I am a thing. But what is this thing that I am? And so we think, well, I have a body, so I am this body. That's probably the first identification we have, is with the body. I am this body. And there's certainly a sort of felt sense of being in the body. There's, we know how it feels to be in the body. So that sort of builds up that sense of I being a thing. And then, we start identifying with what we do, the sort of things I was talking about before, how this body, what it does in the world, the roles it plays, how other people see it, our history, all that we've been through starts building into this sense of identity. And we start becoming a character in our own story of life. And, we almost like become our own hero on his journey through life, or her journey through life, coming across situations, challenges, succeeding here, failing there, always moving on into new adventures in the future. And we forget that we're not actually that character. We think we are, but what we are is just that which is observing that. If you take the analogy of being a character in a story, in a book, when you read a book, you can get totally absorbed in the story of the book and the character. You start, if it's a good story and well written, you start feeling, what the character's feeling. You think, oh my God, what's going to happen to him now? Or, that was great. And you forget you are the person reading the book. And in the same way, we forget that we are that which is experiencing all this, knowing all this. But we get identified with the story, with what we're doing. And even we begin to identify with the sense that, I, this individual self, is the consciousness, that I, this little self, this separate self, is the consciousness that is observing all this. And again, that's not really true, because that little self can completely drop away. I mean, you may have some mystical experience, various ways, where that sense of being an individual completely dissolves and disappears. And that can be a very, enlightening, awakening experience for many people. But when that sense of individual self disappears, consciousness hasn't gone. You are still aware. There is still awareness. Now you are aware of being in a state where there is no ego, there is no individual self. So that just shows that that awareness is always there. It's not something that comes with the individual self. So what that individual self is looking for ultimately is always the same. And it's what we're all looking for all the time, which is basically, in one way, how can we return home? How can we return to being? Which we sort of think about is, how can I return to being happy? How can I return to a state of being content? None of us want to suffer. None of us want to be in pain. And so that's our deep motivation. I think it's completely natural. It's not egocentric to want to be happy. The ways in which we may try to be happy can be egocentric, but wanting to be happy, wanting to be at peace, is a completely natural thing. I think, as the Dalai Lama once said, in the final analysis, the hope of every person is simply peace of mind. That's what we're looking for. And I call that natural mind, the mind in its natural state. And by natural, I mean the mind that is untarnished, unperturbed, that's not colored by what's going on. And that is the mind in its essence. As I was saying earlier, the clay is not affected by being a pot. In the same way, our essence, natural mind, is not actually affected by whatever's going on, the thoughts, the feelings, etc. And when I say natural, I should point out, I don't mean normal. The normal state of consciousness, the norm means the average, where everybody is. The normal state of consciousness is one of worry, discontent, excitement, whatever it is, planning, remembering. And that often brings some sort of, it's a perturbation of the mind. And that comes from wanting, we want things to be okay. We want to feel good. But what happens is, if everything is okay in our world, if I'm not cold, if I'm not hungry, if I'm not sick, if there's no immediate danger, if everything is okay in my world, then I feel okay inside. It's a completely natural correspondence that if my world is okay, I feel okay. That's what I call natural mind, is that deep feeling of okayness. It's peace, there's contentment, there's nothing to worry about. And then something comes along which does need our concern. I'll take a simple example. I'm feeling hungry. There's something that's important for my survival, ultimately. And I stop feeling okay. When I feel hungry, I no longer feel content. I feel discontent. There's something I need to take care of. And that discontent becomes the motivation to return to contentment. And in this case, if there's something physically I need to do, I need to eat, I get some food and return to feeling content. And that's the natural alternation. Something arises, we move out of that natural state of contentment into some form of discontent, and we seek to deal with that discontent by doing something, and if we do the right thing, we return to contentment. So That's what I mean by natural mind. And ideally, there should be a sort of an alternation between the two. Hopefully, most of the time, being in a contented state of mind, and then when something arises, moving into a state of discontent. And that's where a lot of our thinking comes from. Our thinking is about what do we need to do to actually come back to contentment. That's why I say it's the universal motivation behind everything we do. The problem with human beings is that we spend most of our time in discontent, which is weird because, given that all we know about the world, the technologies, the understandings we have of how to relieve suffering, deal with pain, how to get what we want, how to change the world, to satisfy our needs, all of that, you'd think we'd be supremely content. But the irony is we are less content than our pets. I mean, if you watch your dog, I mean, I have a dog. If you watch my dog, it's most of the time it's content. It's lying there watching the world go round. If something alerts its attention, it hears my voice or something, its ears prick up. Or if it sees a cat, it's off and chasing it. But most of the time, it's there. It's in a state of contentment. So the question is, why are we so often just not in that state of contentment, not in that state of natural mind? And I think an underlying reason here is it's a belief system, which I sometimes call the fundamental belief of our culture, and probably of all human cultures initially, is we have this mindset, this belief that says, if you're not happy, if you're not content, you need to do something about it. You need to get something. You need to have something. You need some new experience. But basically it says, if you're not content, there is something amiss with your world. And I say, if the reason that we're not content is there is something amiss with the world, something causing me pain or I'm hungry, whatever, then that's true. But most of the time, the reason we're discontent is not because there's anything wrong with the world, but because in our thinking, in our imagination, we start thinking about, oh, I don't like this experience. I'm not happy with this, or don't like what happened yesterday, or I did like it, but I wish it would continue. Or more often than not, because we're really, thinking about our future and where we're going, we start worrying about, oh, what if this happens? I hope this, how am I going to prepare for this phone call, whatever. We're moving into discontent, self-created discontent, when there's actually nothing wrong. And yet we're creating this discontent. And one of my favorite quotes is from Mark Twain, who said something to the effect of, my life has been full of disasters, most of which never happened. And so we're living in this state of discontent. And that's the ego mind. It's the ego mind that is worrying about what might happen, what could happen, how did things go right or wrong yesterday. That's the ego mind, which almost lives on discontent. And so it's keeping us away from that natural state of contentment. It's veiling it. I like the word veil. It's hiding it. You could say the contentment is really the absence of discontent. So the discontent is something we're creating, and then our natural state of being is one in which there is the absence of discontent, and that is peace, ease, inner peace. And that's what we're looking for. We're looking to return to that state of ease, contentment. But in our culture, we're so strongly conditioned into believing that the way to that is by getting the world to be the right way, changing the world in some way. And I mean, it starts with our parents. That I think we all learn that from our parents. And if you're not happy, do something, get something. I remember with my own parents, I mean, it was there most of my childhood. But I can remember a time when, I suppose in my early 20s, I'd been to visit my parents, been home, and my mother decided, as I was leaving, it was just like the time to give me a pep talk. And she said, you know, you've been to university, you've got these degrees, you've been to India, you've done that, you know, you've studied meditation. Don't you think now it's about time you got a job, got a job? And I was still in my sort of fairly reactionary phase, and I sort of said, why? And she said, well, you know, so that you can, you know, have nice incomes, you know, buy a nice house, you may want to get married, go on nice vacations. I kept on asking why. And she said, well, so that you can be happy, of course. And I said to her, aren't I happy? And I just always remember this look across. Her face sort of looked at me and she said, well, yes, I suppose you are. She got it. She got it. That's what we're really looking for, is not the job, the vacation, the nice house, the good clothes, whatever it is. What we're really looking for is to be happy, to be at peace. And I say it's almost like hypnotized into us in our culture. We become addicted to the things, the possessions, the experiences that we think will make us happy. And to some extent they do, but it's not what it seems. I mean, we buy something, we buy a new piece of clothing, a new jacket, say, and we feel good. And we think that buying the jacket is what's made us happy. And that's what fuels the addiction. Now I'm feeling unhappy, I'll go and buy myself some more clothes, or whatever it is, go out for an even better meal, or do whatever it is we think is going to make us happy. We get caught up in that pattern of almost an addiction. But if you look more closely at what's going on, it's not that getting the jacket or whatever it is, the new car, whatever it is, the great gourmet meal that makes us happy. And this is why I think buying on the internet is fascinating, because if you go to look for your jacket on the internet, you go to buy it on the internet, as many of us do, and probably these days we're doing even more of. You search for it, you find out, you know, the style, the right color, whatever it is, the right size, and you look around and the right price. Finally, you've nailed it down, and you hit that button that says buy now. And that's when you feel good. You've hit that button, buy now. The jacket's not going to arrive for several days. And yet that's the moment we feel good. And we feel good not because we've actually got this new item. We feel good because we've stopped creating discontent for ourselves. All the time we wanted the new jacket, we were fueling discontent. We're thinking, oh, I can't be fully happy until I get what I want. So we are creating discontent. And then when we buy something, we think that buying something has made us happy, but it's actually not that at all. We have stopped making ourselves unhappy over that particular issue. Others will arise, and maybe the jacket arises, and we realize it's the wrong color after all, and we're back into discontent. But the point is, it's not that things make us happy. It's that we make ourselves discontent over the wanting, the thinking that things will make us happy, that new experiences, whatever it is, will make us happy. That belief system, which is really the belief system of the ego mind, that belief system continually creates discontent. And I think what is important about seeing it this way is that it isn't a question then of how do we get rid of the ego, but how do we step out of the discontent? How do we step out of the discontented thinking? And that's much easier than trying to get rid of the ego. In some spiritual circles, the ego is seen as some enemy. It's got to be got rid of, it's got to be transcended, it's got to be beaten, it's got to be surrendered. As I said earlier, it's there for a very useful purpose, but most of the time it isn't needed. But it's there when it is there. It's there as an ally. It's actually trying to help us. It's actually trying to help us, or help this organism navigate its way through the world. But it's just, most of the time, it's not actually needed. But it's not something to be got rid of. It's something we need to step out of. And when we do step out of it, then we naturally come back to being at home again. But it's this belief system I think we need to let go of. And that's what I think most spiritual teachings are about, is seeing that this belief in the material world to provide us happiness is the fundamental mistake. I mean, some lines that I like from Christianity that I seem to me really reflect this is that statement you sometimes see: sinners repent, the kingdom of heaven is at hand. If you go back to the original meanings of the words, it's fascinating. I mean, the way that's sometimes interpreted is like, those of you who've done wrong, those of you who've sinned, be sorry, because the day of judgment is coming. And if you've really been sorry and repented, you'll be okay. But if you haven't repented, then you're not going to be forgiven. If you look back to the original meanings of the words, it's quite fascinating. The word sin in Greek, amatano, is a term from archery. It means to miss the bullseye, to miss the satisfaction of hitting the target. And the target we're looking for is, how do we come back home? How do we come back to being at peace in ourselves? That's the target we're looking for. Those who've missed the target, that a sinner is someone who's missed the target, someone who's looking to come back home, to come back to being at peace. If you haven't found it, then repent, the original meaning for word for repent, is to go beyond metanoia, to go beyond the mind, because what you're looking for, the kingdom of heaven, is at hand. It's right here within us. It's not far away. It's not out there. It's right here. And that's just one example, I think, of where so many spiritual teachings in one way or another are saying this belief that things are going to make us happy is the fault. That what we miss is the fact that our own beingness, that state of natural mind is where we need to come back to. We need, all of us just need to come back home, and to come back home repeatedly. It's not, I think, again, there's this idea somehow that, we're going to get enlightened. We're going to achieve some state and everything's going to change. I don't see it that way. I see it more as like, we can awaken, we can become enlightened, if you like, at any moment, and we're going to fall out of it at any moment. But becoming enlightened is like a lightening of the load. It's lightening of the worries, lightening of the concerns. And the simplest way that I found for this is just in any moment, just to pause our thinking, whatever you might be thinking. I mean, even right now, whatever you're thinking, what I've said may have triggered some thoughts, or whatever what I'm saying now, or your mind may be somewhere else. Whatever you're thinking, we have that freedom to choose to not follow that particular thought anymore. And just notice what happens when you just choose not to follow that thought anymore. There's usually a sense of maybe a relaxing, a little sense of relief, a little sense of ease. And that's because the thought is taking us out, away from ourselves. And the choosing not to follow it, we're just not going out away from ourselves quite so much. Choosing not to follow the thought, we're just falling back a little closer to home, a little closer to just that beingness, the I amness. And I offer that to you as a practice you can use anytime. anytime. In fact, the more the better. Just whenever you think about it in the day, just pause. Pause your thinking and notice how it feels. I think that's the important thing. Notice how it feels not to be caught up in thought. Let's say the thought will come back, but just noticing in that moment how it feels not to be caught up in thought. And that in a way is just remembering how it is becoming closer to home. And that then becomes a reinforcement to do that more often, to drop in more often. And another technique related to this, which the Course in Miracles really was very influential for me on this. And it comes back to the title of this conference, which Bill chose, The New Beginning, which is a chapter towards the end of the text of A Course in Miracles. And when I read that, something just lit up inside me. And I'm sure all those who follow the Course know it very well. For those who aren't so familiar with the Course in Miracles, I just very briefly summarize what it says. It's basically saying, if you're not content, if you're suffering, and you've tried everything you can do to solve a problem, maybe the problem is not in the world, but maybe the problem is in how you're looking at things. You're caught in the ego's mindset, the ego's thought system, the ego's way of looking at things. And I say the ego, of course, I don't mean the ego. You're caught in an egoic way of thinking. And the egoic way of thinking, the egoic mindset, it thinks it is right. Its job is to be right. Its job is to convince you of what you need to do. So it can be very insistent. And because it's very insistent, it can be quite hard to let go of, to step out of. And in fact, if you do ask your ego mind, what am I caught in? Its liable will just come up with another egoic thought. And so the brilliant thing what the Course says here is like, just to pause and ask, could there be another way of looking at this? And what it's doing is saying, we're not asking the ego mind to come up with another solution. It's actually, we're asking our own inner being. We're asking that inner knowing. We're asking our deeper being to show us something that we're not seeing because we're caught in the ego mind. We're asking it to show us, is there another way of seeing this? And what I find is sometimes there is, sometimes there isn't. And I like something the Course says there, which I find really valuable. It says, there's no harm in asking. There's no harm in asking. Maybe there is, maybe there isn't. No harm in asking. But what then happens is something then appears to me. It isn't I work out something. Something appears to me. A new way of seeing comes to me. And generally that new way of seeing has three characteristics to it for me. One, there's a greater sense of ease that comes with it. It's like, the ego mind relaxes. I see something that's just, it's much more obvious. And it's like, why hadn't I seen this before is often my response. Why hadn't I seen this before? And the reason I hadn't seen it before is I was so caught in the egoic thinking, I didn't give myself a chance to see it. And most importantly, with it nearly always comes a sense of love, a sense of compassion, a sense of understanding. In a way, the ego mind doesn't know love. It's out for itself, what it thinks it needs. And the love comes from the self. I know the Course is saying that so many times, but Swami Muktananda, Indian teacher, in the last century, used to say, love is the secret sensation of the self. Love is how it feels inside when we touch into ourself. And so that is another practice, which again, we can do at any time of the day, whenever we're feeling stuck, unhappy, whatever it is, things aren't working out, we've tried everything, we're still not happy. Just to pause and just to pose that question. And to me, finally, just want to say, to me, that is prayer. We think of prayer as praying to some higher power, some divinity, something beyond us. We're praying to something beyond us to do something, to change the world in some way, to intervene in the world, to make it okay. Which in a way is just asking the divine to do the ego's work. It's like, I can't change the world. I'd really like to see this happen. Please, God, will you do this for me? I'm being very superficial here, obviously, but there's a sense in which, you know, we are asking the divine to intervene in the world. The intervention we need is not in the world. The intervention we need is in the mind. That's where we go wrong. So this thing of just asking for another way of seeing is asking, if you like, the divine in ourself, our own being, to intervene in the mind, because that's where the problem's beginning, and that's where we really need the intervention. So what I'd like to do, I see time is moving on. I said I like to do a very brief meditation, just for 5 minutes. And then we'll have some discussion. Because again, having a practice of meditation is really important. To be able to just allow the mind to come to a state of stillness. So we drop back into natural mind and we just come back to that feeling of being at home. And that's why I use the word home, because for me, coming back to that sense of stillness is a sense of coming home. And the practice that I like to share with people is not one of trying to get anywhere or making things happen, but just letting the mind relax, relaxing back into the present moment. So just for 5 minutes, just lead you in a very short meditation, just to give you a taste of this. It's something many of you may already do, but I just like to do this for all of us. So just to begin, just close your eyes. Nothing else. Almost forgetting everything you've ever heard about meditation. Just closing your eyes and noticing what's going on inside. Probably notice thoughts there. Notice some feelings that are there. Noticing your body. Various sensations that are there. There's the places where you're touching the world, so to speak, where, you know, wherever your feet are against, or your back against the seat. There's lots of different sensations there. Whatever your fingers are touching. We're not labeling anything, we're just opening your awareness to what is there in the present moment. Not focusing on anything. Just letting the awareness be very relaxed. And you may notice the breath, the body gently breathing. But we're not focusing on it, just noticing it's there. Then you may notice sensations in your face, jaw. If you feel any tensions, just noticing them, not trying to change them. We're just exploring what is there and just allowing it to be as it is. As I say, not trying to get anywhere, not trying to change anything. But just letting the attention come back to the body, coming back home in that sense, to our physical home. And you will, from time to time, many times, notice the attention has wandered away from the present into some thought about something or other. First of all, don't blame yourself. It happens to everybody all the time, a lot of the time. But just when you notice you've wandered off, just let the attention come back to here, being here now. Coming back to the experience of sitting here. Nowhere else to go at this time. And just letting the attention soften and expand. So rather than being aware of any particular feeling or sensation, just letting it expand a little. You're almost stepping back from any particular experience. Just letting the attention itself begin to relax. When we talk about relaxing the mind, we're really talking about relaxing the attention, relaxing the focus. Letting the focus become softer, more open, more expansive. Whenever you notice you're wandering off, just choosing not to follow that thought anymore. Just coming back to being here. And noticing any quality of stillness or quietness you may be noticing. And noticing that whatever you may be noticing, experiencing, that sense of I amness, the I am that is always there. Just allowing ourselves just to rest in this, just soak in it for a moment or two. And so slowly, gently, just letting our attention come back to being here in this session. Just gently, when you feel ready, just slowly opening the eyes, letting a little light in. And just noticing how you're feeling as you do. So we have half an hour together still. And if there's any questions, anything you'd like to explore, Bill's going to monitor your questions and answers and let me know what you want to know. And hopefully, if we can actually to have you on screen, it's nice to see the questioner, to actually see you and connect with you. So do we have any questions, Bill?
There's a question from Rosalind, would you like to come on the screen, Rosalind, and ask your question? You mentioned early on that I'm in love with this phrasing in the beginning, am I? Am I? And that was I wrote that down too. That was a great. Instead of, you went from who to the real question might be what am I, and then you went to am I, and then and you connected with that that you told us about the pots and how
Yep.
how the different pots all had the same essence, and then you talked about the art that art thou am I. And Rosalind has this question about that. Rosalind, can I bring you on? Would you raise your hand so I can find you easily, and then I'll bring you on to ask your question? You had some question about when we are trying to, I'll read the question, Peter, in case she doesn't raise her hand. When we are trying to get folks in touch with the knower that is not involved with the age, feelings, situation, etc., this might be a great phrasing. What are your thoughts, or your thoughts? I am in love with his phrasing in the beginning, am I? So that's kind of a question. I'm not positive that I'm saying it right.
Okay, I think I get the gist. Yes, I find this the most useful question, and that's why I was saying, the who am I is misleading. It takes the mind off in the wrong direction, and people can spend. They used to do these enlightenment intensives where you spend a whole weekend in couples, in pairs, posing who am I, and people answering who am I, who are you, who are you, who are you, until finally, maybe after a day, it all broke down. You just realized, here I am. I don't think we need to go through any of that stuff. As I say, the first thing is to realize what it's really pointing to is what am I? But even that can take the mind off. And that's why I said I'd like to just drop all of that and just say, am I? And, everybody, the answer is yes, of course. We know that. We know I am. It's the one thing we know for sure is I am. Here I am. I am experiencing this right now. I am, whatever it is, I am here. So I agree. To me, it's a really good way to get it across to people, because what we tend to do is we are looking for I. And you'll never find I, because the I that is looking for something else, what we're looking for is the I that is looking, the I that is experiencing. But as soon as we look for something we can call I, we are looking for another object of experience, whatever it is. It may be just a faint feeling in the heart. Someone says, my sense of self is this feeling in the heart. Well, yes, there's a feeling in the heart which feels very close and warm, but what we're pointing to here is the I that is knowing that sense of feeling in the heart. And so whenever we start looking for I, whenever we start even looking for I am, or what I am, we are taking the attention out in the wrong direction again. And that's why these questions are really, in a way, like a Zen koan, like they're questions which there is no answer to, but when you let go of the questioning, you come back to what it was pointing towards. And that's why I say I like am I, because the answer is so clear. Yes, I am. It just brings us straight back home.
Yes. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, we have some questions generating here on the Q&A, and we'd love to have you come on the screen if you raise your hand, so that we can talk directly to you and Peter can see who he's talking to. Thank you, Elizabeth. I'm going to make you a panelist so you can come on the screen with us. And anyone else that would like to come up on the screen, please. There you are. Hi, Elizabeth.
Hi, it's
Welcome.
so lovely to be amongst this wonderful community. Can you hear me?
Yes,
We can hear
yes,
you, yes, and see you.
Wonderful.
yes.
Oh, I've loved being here, but to hear you talk today, thank you so much. I really enjoyed to make a question and not just spend time saying how great this all is. I want to talk about the way you talked about the ego. I thought that was so very powerful. And if you could say a bit more about this egoic mindset, because I really identified with how you say, you said something about, why have I never thought this way before? And it's so incredible, this moment where you give time to something, you can quiet that ego mind for a minute and get to hear something that tells you to see something differently that you've been so very convinced about. But it feels like a continuous battle. And could you say a bit more about this, please?
Yes, I mean, firstly, I reframe it as not as a continual battle.
Okay.
A battle is an ego mind concept, an ego mind idea that there's something to battle, there's something to fight, there's something to change.
Yes.
Wrong
use of words.
Yes, but it's also it's an important point as well, because we're not battling it, we're trying to get rid of it. We're waking up from it.
That's it. That's what I want you to talk about. Yes.
Awakening from it. It's another way of thinking about the ego mind. It's a lens through which we see the world. And it's a lens that, as I say, is trying to look after us, trying to take care of us. It's actually got our best interests at heart. But most of the time, it's actually not being very useful. I mean, one thing I like to say sometimes when I notice it is, thank you for caring, but right now, you're not really helping either of us. So it's a taking off, it's a taking away of the lens. So it's not battling something, but it's like removing that lens from our perception and coming back to seeing things as they are without that particular distortion that comes in. That distortion is because there's some particular need, there may be some judgment going on, there's some planning that needs to happen, or whatever it is. That's the lens through which we're seeing things at the moment. So taking off the lens. And that's why I like this practice of just pausing the thinking, because the lens is a mode of thinking. It's a mode of thinking we get caught up in. And so we have the choice at any moment. I think this is where we really have choice. I mean, there's whole questions of free will and all that, which I won't get into now. But I think the real choice we each have all the time is the choice not to follow a particular thought stream any further. And when we exercise that choice and we just say, thank you, no more, I'm not following you any further, then we just fall back closer to ourselves automatically. So that's what I recommend as a practice, just that pausing and as I say, noticing how it feels to pause, because that's where the feedback comes.
Yeah.
It's like, yes, it feels good. And that becomes the motivation reminder.
And there's so much peace in it. And really, if anything, it's the closest to enlightenment that I could feel, is that moment where you know you can be that powerful. You literally can change your outlook on the world, or whatever this magnificent thing is, problem, whatever, worldly title we've given to it, depression, illness, whatever. But we become that powerful. So thank you so very much. Thank you. Thanks, Bill.
Thank you.
Thank you, Elizabeth.
And just to add, it's not the closest you come to enlightenment, it is enlightenment.
Is it? Hey.
It's becoming enlightened again and again and again. It's waking up again. We wake up and we fall asleep. We wake up and we fall asleep. We wake up and we fall asleep.
Wonderful.
And so just, practicing waking up in the moment.
Nice.
Skilled.
Thank you, Elizabeth. That was awesome. We have another couple of questions. Alejandro is coming in to ask a question. Alejandro, let's see, bringing you in. There you are.
Hello, I'm in?
Yes.
All right.
Yes. Good.
Hello.
Hello
Good.
there.
Greetings from Chile in South America. It's wonderful to listen to your words, Peter. Just listening to your voice took me back to early 1990s at the Monroe Institute. So the question popped up in my mind that from one side, we think of coming home, of looking inside and finding the peace within. And on the other side, on my days there, I learned of these other levels of consciousness in which you were also like home, but with others, if I can convey the idea.
Mm-hmm.
So we listened to your work while there. So it just came, it popped up. So the question is just to ask if you have any comments on that of being home. It's not like a dichotomy of being alone within or being outside in the world buying stuff and meeting with people, but being within and outside too. It's I don't know if you get the idea.
Yeah. And there, I think at the Monroe Institute, because I used to teach there a bit myself, they're looking at other states of consciousness where we are perhaps connected with other aspects of ourselves, but also with maybe other consciousnesses. It's going in. It's a whole other world that they're looking at there, and that, some people find that really valuable. Obviously, you have. I think the point is, though, that the I am home is always there. If you're, in some wonderful altered state of consciousness, or you're out in some astral plane or whatever it is, the I am that is knowing that experience, the I-ness, the amness, is still there. It hasn't changed. And that's the point about, the clay pots. The essence is always there. So you can make this wonderful, beautiful, elaborate colored pot. The clay is still there, is still the same. And so in all these experiences, which can be fascinating, is not to lose sight of that sense of home, that sense of, here I am. Here I am. In all of this wonderful stuff, here I am.
Thank you. The clay pots is a beautiful metaphor. Thank you very much.
Yes.
Pleasure.
Thank you, Alejandro. Appreciate you coming on.
Thanks.
We have two more. We have Tambra. You want to keep going with questions?
Oh, yes, we've got another 15 minutes. So
Great.
please.
Okay. All right, Tambra, come on up. It's good to see you here, hon. And I love, Peter, you have given us a lot of nourishment, a lot of things to consider and to drink in, and also that meditation was very powerful. Thank you for that. Tambra, are you coming? I think you're coming in, right? I did move you to...
It's not showing my video, but can you hear me?
Okay, yes, we hear
I
you.
hear you, yes.
Okay,
I don't
great.
know why my video is not on. I didn't block it, but
Okay.
So here's my question. Bill, you've talked about this a lot, and so have others. When you are thinking and you're caught up in the ego mind, and you've got an idea, you've got something, and for me, I describe it as spinning. You're spinning in this. You're spinning in this, and it's a problem, and you're feeling whatever, but you're judging it in some way. It's not right, and so you're spinning about it, and you're doing all these things. And so just choosing what you're describing, choose to stop doing that. Just choose a different thought. And that hasn't worked for me. I'll choose it, then keep spinning. It's like my one foot stops and then I keep spinning. So Bill has talked about it, and Vicky Poppy too have talked about bringing the thought in, bringing in whatever that experience or thought in, bring it in close, and then just look at it and love it and accept it as it is. And so that's helpful. And I wanted to see what you would say about that, because this idea, it's like the Holy Grail for me. And so I want to ask everybody about it, what your take is, because it's outstanding.
Yeah. The key thing is finding ways that work for us to let go of that thinking. And it's not the practice I was suggesting of just pausing a thought isn't replacing it with another thought. And that's something else that people can do, is that if you've got a thought that's disturbing, you can replace it with another thought. But then the disturbing thought is probably still somewhere in the background, having been pushed away. So the practice of choosing not to follow that particular thought any further can only be a moment, may only be a moment or two. It's not like, that's it for the rest of the day. Often for me, it's just, a few seconds of tasting that. But if it's something that's really preoccupying my mind, it'll come back. And then like, there you are again, and just choosing to come back. So that's the essence of the practice that I was suggesting.
Okay.
It's not thinking you'll get rid of it. It's just in that moment, choosing not to follow it any further. And certainly, I mean, the thing you're talking about that Bill's suggesting, yes, that there's other approaches one can do as well. And one of the things I talk about at other times, haven't done so far today, is letting go of something. In this case, we may want to let go of a thought. We think of letting go as trying to get rid of something. I've got this thought, I've got this feeling I don't like. I want to let go of it, meaning I want it to go away. I want to get rid of it. I like to reframe letting go as letting in and letting be. And I think that's what you're talking about here.
Yes.
Rather than resisting something, wishing it would go away, is say, okay, who are you? Make friends with it. Be curious. What's going on here? And usually with some thought like this, there's probably something going on in the body, some tension or something, or discomfort or unease or something. Just say, okay, what's going on here? Look at the thought, let it in, see what's there, and notice anything that's going on in your body. And just allowing it to be begins to diffuse it. It ceases to become so urgent, because the urgency is saying, hey, there's something important here. I want your attention. Please, please, please. Say, okay, I'm here. What do you want? And that often begins to help it begin to diffuse. And as you say, be curious and love it. Again, it comes back to the thing of not seeing thoughts as an enemy. You love them. And that's why I say, I know you're trying to help, but right now, please, you're not really you're not really helping that much. So I was suggesting one thing, but anything you find that allows you to soften the thought, to step back from it, anything that works, great.
Thank you. I love I write notes madly. Be curious. That just, to me, that lightened it up, because I am a curious person.
Yeah.
So just be curious about it and ask it, because, then you're just a reporter, just taking notes. You're going to write a story later. So
Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks very much.
Like, what's really going on here? Being curious about anything that's going on in the body, because usually there's something, whenever we're caught up in a thought, there's some little thing going on in the body, maybe some tension, some holding, or something, whatever it is, maybe some excitement's going on. Just be curious about what's going on in the body as well.
There I am. Okay.
I saw you for a second there at last.
For a second, she came on, didn't she? I know. I don't know how that happened. Thank you, Tambra, for that. That was great. And I love Peter, I love your dialogue. You're just kind of that innocent dialogue that says, thank you for trying to help right now, but you're pausing on the interaction with the idea of joining the experience. Yeah, it's great. So Lynn has her hand up, and I brought her on. Lynn, bringing you on the screen if your video is available. That took quite a long time to get Tambra on. Do we have you available? Lynn, can you hear us? Hello, Lynn. Can you hear us? I do see you have joined us. Can you hear us? I'm going to unmute you. There you go. Can you hear?
Hi.
There you go.
Thank you so much. You were so beautiful, Peter. Oh, you touched me. I don't really have a question. You just like gave me so much to think about. When you talked about the ego, how first discontentment, when you buy something, it makes you content, but that's like an addiction. You keep needing more and more of a fix. And with the self, I love what you said with the self. Oh my God. That you're the self when you're feeling love. And wouldn't that's a much better choice to come back to than to these thoughts that are, trying to drag you into the darkness. I wrote something once. It was, my name is Lynn. I'm a recovering human being. And I wrote 12 steps. But that reminds me so much. Oh, thank God for us. We're lights. We're all lights. And I'm so grateful to be in this conference. Thank you so much, Bill.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank you, Lynn. We have about 8 minutes left, and we have one or two more questions in the Q&A. Would you like to hear those, Peter?
Yes, please. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you, Lynn, for being here. And on the Q&A, Alan says, I see a lot of groups of people desiring major changes in our society, but very few on the topic of what kind of society we want to live in, what sort of power structures, economy, integrative organizations, etc. What is your view on this, Peter?
I don't have any views on particular structures, but I have a view on sort of the principle of what should be behind the structures. And nearly all the structures we have are based upon the egoic thinking. And egoic thinking leads to control, it leads to power, it leads to manipulation. However benevolent the structures may have been to start with, the individuals within them are nearly always coming from an egoic mode of consciousness most of the time. So I think the principle is that the structures need to come out of this other place, the place we call home, that isn't caught up in a particular lens. So the structures need to come out of, first of all, connecting with the peace in ourselves, rather than coming at it, from a point of war, of what needs to change. It's like coming out of peace. I mean, I think we all know this, in our dealings with people. If you come out of anger or frustration or resentment or whatever it is, you don't usually respond in the best way. If we can come out of, a sense of ease, we're going to respond in a much better way. And love, we come up with so the structures we create are caring. So I don't have a particular answers. I would like to see that what we create, the structures we create, are coming from that, are coming from quality of peace and love. It sounds like the 60s, but it's absolutely true always.
Mm.
That's where we need to be coming from. And keeping that, whatever structures emerge, whatever organizations, whatever happens, to keep coming back to that, to keep coming back to it. I think that's really crucial.
Mm. Well, you know what? The 60s is what brought us to where we are right now today. Thank God for the 60s, man. It took us out of it brought us out of the Vietnam War situation. That 60s is like the new Renaissance, and I think it ushered in this consciousness that we're in right now. I'm thankful for that. But there is one more question, and we have time. So it says, Judy has mentioned, when in fear, I forget to ask my guide for help. Is there a good way to remember quicker?
That is the eternal question, probably the most important question. It's easy to talk about all this, and then when the rubber hits the road and we're caught up in something, we're lost. Finding reminders, finding ways to, little things that we can set up to remind ourselves of what to do. And I used to have a practice, I say used to because I should be doing it more now, was like whenever I got into or out of the car, I would always stop for a moment. It's like finding things to just make me pause and stop. Other people can be really helpful in this. It's I love the Buddhist concept of Sangha, the community of people who are also on the path. And asking other people, asking your friends, if you see me getting stuck on something, please tell me, because sometimes it takes somebody else out there to remind us. Another thing I find useful at times is noticing when there's tension, to be on the lookout for tension, because that's something that tension does grab our attention. It's meant to grab our attention in some way or another. And what we often try to do is then deal with it. But it's saying if there's tension in the body or in the mind, in the feelings, tension is usually a sign we're caught up in the ego mind in some way or other. So it's like if you're noticing tension, it can be a good thing to say, okay, am I caught up in in your case, some fear or something or other? That can be a reminder. But I agree, it's not easy, because when we're caught in something, we're caught in it. So it's finding little things, whatever works for you, even putting little notes up around the house on your mirror or whatever, am I feeling any fear or something about something? It's challenging, but I think what you're saying is really important, that we find this for ourselves. I don't know whether that helps at all.
Wow, that was, I loved your session, your insights, the variety of the ways that you established little nuggets of ideas and insights to help us to come back, or to bring us to that place of being home, of going home, of living in that place of home. And I just think that your talk today was brilliant. Thank you, Peter, for being one of our presenters here. It's my joy to meet you personally, and it's our joy for a New Beginning World Conference to be able to bring you over from the non-dual side. It sounds like, you know a lot about the Course in Miracles. You brought a lot of the Course in today to integrate into divine and really oneness ideas and practice. I would say practices and just establishing ourselves in the truth. Mm. So thank you so much for being here. I'm going to let you close with any final words you would have to say, and then we've finished this part of our morning session, and we'll move on to lunch for everyone. And then you all that are coming back we're going to meet you again at 1 p.m. to 1:45. There's a meditation or a conference highlights open meeting with Cindy Krupp. And Peter, thank you for being our keynote speaker this morning.
Well, thank you, Bill, and thank you for inviting me. I mean, when you first invited me, I was excited because, you know, say I've got a foot in both camps, but more in the non-dual camp. But you know, I've never actually spoken anywhere about the course or my relationship to the course and how it relates to non-duality. I've always seen the course as a non-dual teaching myself, and so I really welcome this opportunity to actually talk about that and explore that. So just really want to thank you for inviting me, and I've really enjoyed being with you and everybody else.
Awesome. Well, it's been our joy, and I'm sure I'll be asking you to come back because you're a keeper.
I will. I'll come back with great pleasure.
Thank you. All right, everyone. We'll see you in the next session, which will be the conference highlights. And then we have our go to your agenda on the conference page and see what the general session and the Lisa Natoli, my wife, is a keynote speaker this afternoon, and I look forward to seeing everyone in the rest of the conference. And Peter, my blessings to you and Science and Non-Duality, and Maurizio and Zaya. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.